Hey everyone, and thank you for joining this talk on decarbonizing the construction industry. I'm happy to have this opportunity to share some of our firm's thinking on the topic with fellow construction industry colleagues, and I'd like to also thank the NHEO Institute and the Construction Conference Organizing Committee for giving me this opportunity to address everyone. So my name's Josh Johnson. I'm an associate partner with McKinsey Company based out of Philly, and I'm actually a bit of a late joiner to the construction industry. I started my career leading continuous improvement programs with Cummins, and focused a lot in a lot of their manufacturing plants in their new and recon parts business. And it was there that I got exposed to a lot of continuous improvement thinking, lean manufacturing concepts. And once I joined McKinsey, started applying those things to construction sites, so lean field execution, execution excellence, etc. Um, I'm now a member of the North America Regional Leadership Team for McKinsey's Engineering, Construction, and Building Materials practice. And for those of you interested in connecting more directly in this virtual world, I'm happy to make 15 minutes or so to chat with anyone at any level on pretty much anything to do with construction or construction technology. So while this is a recorded presentation, please ping me on LinkedIn. Let's connect and let's have a conversation. So before we jump into the content of the day, I want to take a brief moment for a shameless plug. We at McKinsey are a global management consulting firm. We advise our clients on some of their most pressing issues and really aspire to be impact partners and authoritative voices on the most important topics that are facing our clients. And as such, in addition to a lot of our client work, we also freely and publicly publish perspectives on different industries. And what you see in front of you is just kind of a subset of the perspectives that we've published on the construction industry, where we think the industry is going, where we think productivity can happen, where we think sustainable initiatives will go. And so, for those of you interested in either sustainability or perspectives on construction overall, please visit our website. Everything that you see here and more is absolutely free in terms of our perspectives. And again, would love to connect with anyone interested to discuss any of that content. So I always like to start these conversations with a bit of context, because as construction industry natives, we sometimes, might not appreciate how big and important the industry is. So the global construction ecosystem, we'll call it, was $13 trillion in 2019. So to give that some context, I like to say if this were a nation state, construction land would be the third largest nation state in the world behind the US and China. So absolutely massive amount of spend and an absolutely massive amount of potential impact on, everything to do with the global economy. But when you look and dive a bit deeper into construction land, right, like we start to recognize that the construction ecosystem actually has hyperlocal dynamics. And for those of us who are here who are native, none of this is necessarily rocket science, but it's good to see and set context, right? Like there are hyperlocal inputs, markets, and regulations. There are specific complex inputs with technical drawings, technical professionals, advisors. It's a highly fragmented ecosystem. And so subcontractors in one geography, even one region within a country, can be very different than the subcontractor set in another. Every project is its own snowflake. And there could be potentially misaligned contractual structures and incentives. So all of these things are here to say that in addition to being really, really large and meaningfully important to the global economy, construction land is really complex. And that goes on to the topic of the day, sustainability in construction. Based on just its pure size and scale, the construction value chain is one of the largest single contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. And so when we look at, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, we see that the construction value chain overall, and this is including, materials production, actual construction work, some of the long-term operations of the assets after they've been built, you start to see about a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions are contributed to in some way, shape, or form by the construction value chain. And that's meaningfully important because, I don't think that, at least for this audience, this is up for debate, but, global CO2 emissions are spiking. It was a major topic of discussion for our global leaders very recently. And construction's contribution to this through greenhouse gas emissions is clear. And so, the industry has a clear mandate and, to be honest, an opportunity to lead where others may not necessarily have the scale, scope, or position to do so in terms of sustainability and greenhouse gas reduction. And the effects of these impacts and this rising temperature are being felt today, right? We don't have to necessarily go point by point, but it's very clear that as climate change accelerates and the effects of it are exacerbated, our day-to-day lives, from the way that we purchase and evaluate where we're going to live, to the food that we eat, to the infrastructure and capital that we have, both physical capital, financial capital, and natural capital. All of those things are severely affected by the change in climate. And so it's also important to take a step back and understand what opportunity there is, for ESG in a business context, right? This isn't, while this is a clear, social and government priority, it's also a clear business priority, right? Companies that are focused on value creation from ESG show more top line growth and portfolio shift. They show more cost reduction and productivity uplift, and they're de-risking a lot of the transitions from a more carbon heavy economy to a less carbon dependent economy, and that results in measurable impact on the bottom line. So in addition to just being, the right thing to do from a social perspective, focusing on sustainability can also improve the bottom line of a company. And so when we look at the two most widely adapted sustainability frameworks, it's very clear that the focus is on decarbonization. Either we use the UN Sustainability Development Goals or the ESG framework, which is most used by investors. When we kind of frame things, we focus a bit more on the left-hand side of the page. But it's clear that decarbonization is a major lever that can be pulled, and given the construction industry's contribution to overall greenhouse gas emissions, it's a very natural place to look at how and where the construction industry can lean in and support the effort. And this is not, again, a news or surprise to most leaders in construction. We conducted a survey of 400 industry leaders, folks in the industry who have chief X officer in their title across several different players in the construction ecosystem. And it's pretty clear, that all of these senior leaders, above all else, expect a transformation in the industry from sustainability, right? There are other, potential levers that are also, driving force and driving change in the industry. But by far, it is very clear to, every senior leader that we spoke with, or at least the vast majority of them, that in the next 1 to 5 years, they expect major shifts in the industry, driven largely by either regulatory needs or, practical competitive needs around sustainability. But again, if we take a step back and think about the construction industry overall, we'll go back to our nation state example, construction land. Construction land is much further behind on this journey to sustainability than a few other industries. And so that begs the question, how can construction land, meaningfully begin, to accelerate their pace of change and the level of maturity that they have in the space? And so the first thing that we would need to do if we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions is just to crack our laptops open, look at the data and say, well, where is the largest contribution, right? And when you look at, your typical emissions by, life cycle step, we'll call it, and you look at either, call it vertical or horizontal construction, it's very clear that there are 2 to 3 major areas of greenhouse gas emissions and contributions across that value chain, right? The first comes across processing raw materials. So this is, concrete, steel, aggregate and stone, all of the building materials that we produce to actually execute projects. And then the second is the long-term renewal and maintenance work and usage of operational assets, right? All of that contributes far and away more than actually the construction activity on site, either brownfield or greenfield. So that gives us a couple of really clear directions on where we as a ecosystem should be focusing our attention on ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then when you double click into the material side of things, it's also clear that a significant amount of the greenhouse gas contribution comes from actually processing materials. So it's not even transporting things between sites or on-site energy usage to actually conduct the operations. It's literally how do we create the material? How do we process the material and get it into a state where it's usable for construction? And so, it's important, as we look through opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that we pay a special focus on not just on materials. So not just the concrete producers and the steel producers of the world as responsible parties, but also we as practitioners in construction, understanding what are the potential material implications, or rather greenhouse gas implications, the emissions implications of the materials that we're using, the materials that we're choosing, and the advent of new materials as they come out. And it's also worth noting, again, to that point, that no single player can address any of these large opportunities alone. So, we can look at the raw material processing as an example, given, that's what we've discussed currently. It's a no-brainer that the building materials, supply sector within construction would have a lot of impact in that, but there is still significant opportunities, for example, financiers, developers, and designers to heavily impact the amount of greenhouse gas emissions in there through the design and financing and purchasing decisions that they make to actually fund the asset. Even the contractor themselves and the long-term owner of the asset can play a role through either for a larger, more at-scale owner, i.e. like a State Department of Transportation or a large REIT, to give an example, having requirements or mandates around, carbon capture or emissions contribution, throughout the project, right? Not just emissions on site, but also the carbon footprint of the materials used to build the asset. Similarly, when we look at operations, it's the same story, right? You'll have value chain players that can have direct impact, but in both cases, you'll also need, very clear collaboration and input from, not just, the power sector, but also government regulators, financial institutions, and other more broad research bodies to inform, how we act on this. And so, that brings us to what can we do, like, as an industry? Well, I think, And the way that we approach this is to kind of take a step back and say, what are the phases or horizons upon which an individual player can begin to address, their sustainability agenda or aspire to go. Obviously, you would aspire, to try to reach, plateau number 5, where you're anchoring the company culture and the business model and sustainability. It's core to the way that you go about doing business, core to the way that you evaluate opportunities, potential customers, potential suppliers, and partners. And it is kind of ingrained in the way that you operate. But there are several intermediate steps that can be taken and aspire to get there. And the first thing that is important to do as an individual player in the space is to understand first where you are, and second where you want to go. And so, for some players it might just be, we're not in a place where we can, truly, for either cultural reasons, and within the organization, or financial reasons, we're not in a place where we can immediately aspire to go for number 5. Well, then there are still, focusing on compliance and productivity improvement, as a continuum of an opportunity to focus on and identify ways that ESG can be a core part of your business. If you are at compliance or focused more on the reflexive brand and reputation risk, there's an opportunity to really sharpen the pencils and say, how can we actually create value from ESG, and shifting that business portfolio to create an actual competitive advantage through sustainability versus the kind of reflexive stance that some players may take. And so that's the full kind of content that we'll be discussing today. Again, I thank the NHEO and the conference organizing committee for the opportunity to discuss this with you. Again, I'm happy to connect with any and everyone on LinkedIn. Please feel free to ping me, and I look forward to speaking with you. Enjoy the conference.